They executed a 14-year-old boy in 81 minutes. No real lawyer, no real trial. And decades later, they admitted they got it completely wrong. This is George Stinney Jr., the youngest person ever executed in the United States. In 1944, in Alcolu, South Carolina, 2 little girls went missing. Betty June Binnicker, 11, and Mary Emma Thames, 8, had gone out that afternoon and never came home. By morning, a search party found their bodies. Both had been beaten to death. The town went into a panic. Now you need to understand one thing about Alcolu. It was a town where racism wasn't just in the air, it was built into the streets. White families on one side, black families on the other, a literal railroad track dividing them. So when police started asking questions, they weren't exactly following the evidence carefully. Witnesses said the last person seen talking to the girls was a young black boy nearby. That boy was George Stinney Jr. Here's what actually happened. Earlier that afternoon, Betty and Mary had stopped by the Stinney yard asking if George knew where to find wild fruit growing near the ditches. He pointed them in a direction. That was it. A brief moment between children, but that was the connection police needed. The very next morning, officers showed up and took George. No warrant, no process. He was 14 years old, 5 feet 1 inch tall, 95 pounds. They drove him to a jail hours away from his parents, away from every familiar face, claiming it was for his own safety from the white townspeople. And then the interrogation started. No lawyer, no parents, no witnesses. Just George, a terrified black teenager, locked in a room with white officers in the Jim Crow South. Hours later, police came out and announced he had confessed. But there was no written confession, no signed document, no recording, just the word of the officers themselves. A child's life resting entirely on the word of the people who desperately needed to close this case. Psychologists today will tell you that false confessions from minors under high-pressure interrogation are not rare, especially when a child is alone and terrified and will say anything to make it stop. But in 1944, nobody was asking those questions. His family, fearing retaliation, was forced to flee Alcolu entirely, while George sat in a cell waiting for a trial that was just weeks away. The trial lasted 1 day. His lawyer called 0 witnesses, presented 0 evidence, and made no real challenge to the prosecution. The jury, all white, all male, took 10 minutes to return a guilty verdict, 10 minutes to decide the life of a child. George was sentenced to death. He was executed on June 16, 1944, at 7:30 in the morning. He was so small that the electric chair, built for grown men, didn't fit him. He had to sit on his own Bible just to reach the headpiece. He was crying when they walked him in. He was 14 years, 6 months, and 5 days old. 70 years later, the case was re-examined, and everything unraveled. George's younger sister, Amy, came forward and said he had been with her the entire afternoon. He never left her side. No one had ever thought to ask her. There was no physical evidence tying George to the murders. And that confession? Never written down, never recorded. Just a story told by officers who needed someone to blame. In 2014, a judge reviewed the case, vacated the conviction, and officially cleared his name. George Stinney Jr. was innocent. The state of South Carolina executed an innocent 14-year-old boy, Frat, and took 70 years to admit it.